Hey guys, before we get started, I wanted you to click on the link below to get a free copy of the Nevada Edge Guide. This guide is packed full of information about the benefits of Nevada LLCs and the tax strategies, all about using Nevada entities. Full of information that will benefit you and your personal life. Just click the link below. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wealthy and Wise. I'm your host, Cort Christie, and today we're going to be talking about short-term rentals. And if you own a piece of property that might be with Airbnb or VRBO that you're marketing it through, there's some really important things you need to understand about the liabilities that go along with owning a short-term rental property. And in addition to that, there's some pitfalls that come along with taxes that many people don't know about that might actually shock you and leave you owing a lot more tax than you actually thought you would owe just by getting into the short-term rental business. So I have an expert here today to join us. We have Adam Kintigh. Adam, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Cort. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. And Adam, you've been on the show a few times. You're always a great guest. We love having you. And you're an expert in this. You are a senior executive corporate analyst at NCH. You've been doing this for so many years, helping small business owners, helping real estate investors figure out how to structure themselves to protect themselves, and then also look at, what are the tax liabilities of being in business or owning real estate. And short-term rental properties has a whole nother thing going on than just a normal structure for somebody that might be a long-term renter for a piece of real estate that they own. So before we go into that, let's just talk about the foundation. Like, what kind of liabilities do I need to be concerned about when I own a short-term rental property?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's huge liabilities owning any property, and as innocent as you may be, you own the property, you are responsible. I always find it interesting. Airbnb advertises they give you $1 million of insurance for anyone that books through there. And I would be curious to find out how many times has there actually been a problem and Airbnb or VRBO, any of these companies actually pay out. So it becomes a battle of the insurances. So I tell everybody it's so important to keep a good insurance policy. There are just so many things that can happen. The insurance won't pay or won't pay enough. That's why we need to have LLCs. So one of the important parts about structuring these is most people buy the property, sometimes as a primary residence, and then later on decide to hang on to it and rent it out. And you start looking at the numbers of how much I can make with an Airbnb versus what I make with a long-term rental. And it is amazing the amount of money people make on an Airbnb versus the long-term rental. A lot of money there. So they look for ways to increase the profit, and doing this through Airbnb is just a great option, but it's got to be done right from a tax standpoint and from a liability standpoint.
Absolutely. Well, and I think you mentioned they have a $1 million liability, insurance policy to cover claims, but you think of all the things that can happen when somebody's throwing a party or, drinking too much or, having too many people over or allowing people they don't know to come into the environment. What gets stolen, what gets taken, people get hurt. $1 million is really nothing, especially when it comes to injury in a property when something goes wrong. So I think that's what's really critical. I think that, there's so many different types of ways of holding real estate. You can hold it in your personal name. You can hold it in a trust, a land trust. You can put it in a corporation if you wanted to, or an LLC. There's some people that might choose to put it in to something even beyond that. Like, I don't know. Could be just a living trust or something. But what's your one strategy that you send people mostly down the path of?
Yeah, so most people in buying the property, we have a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. And the concern is always, okay, if I put this property into an LLC, as soon as the bank does an internal audit or they sell the mortgage and see your name is not on record, they could always come back and invoke the due on sale clause. Say, where's our money? And you could argue with them, hey, I didn't sell the property, I put it into an LLC that I own. They say, yeah, but legally, you're not the LLC. Where's our money? So we always structure it. We put the property into a land trust. We call them real estate privacy trust. So by doing that, there's a federal law. It's called the Garn-St. Germain Act of 1982, that when we put property into a trust, the bank cannot invoke the due on sale clause. So that's number one. Now, a trust by itself provides us with privacy, but doesn't protect us. So we also set up an LLC that owns that trust. The lifetime beneficiary of the trust is an LLC, so that I'm now protected. So I have my LLC collecting the rent, paying the mortgages and taxes. Whatever's left over, I just write myself a check. Assuming I have a property manager managing this Airbnb activity, that would be passive income, and passive income automatically gets offset by my passive losses, my forced depreciation losses. So I'm paying a lot less tax on that rental income that I'm receiving through the Airbnb.
Now there's some problems potentially if you don't set it up right, or you spend too much time being involved in the property when it comes to tax liability. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so everyone wants to be a great host, and I want to share with you my favorite restaurants in the area and the activities going on this weekend. I want those good reviews. So I'm trying to do those things as a host, but the danger is that if I am actively managing that property and I'm not using a property manager, then my income is no longer passive income, it is now active income. And the tax trap is the active income is now subject to state, federal, and Social Security and Medicare tax, which is a killer. So additionally, because I'm managing my own property, now my passive income is no longer passive, it's active. So all my depreciation losses that normally happen on a long-term rental, those aren't happening anymore. So I'm really getting crushed in taxes. So there's very specific ways we can do this by having one LLC taxed as an S corporation that receives income from Airbnb, and then I'm effectively Airbnb arbitraging my own property. I'm going to rent the use of that property to myself, taking my active income, turning it into passive income. So now my depreciation losses will count on a big chunk of that money. It's just a genius way to do it. Went over this with our CPAs many times, and the effectiveness and is this the right and best way to do it? And from a tax standpoint, it is absolutely the best way to do it. If you have a property manager, you don't do anything, that is passive income. We'll keep it simple. But if you are managing property, we get huge tax benefits out of having the LLC taxed as an S corporation to receive all that income from Airbnb.
And maintain that passive status. I think you've got that passive income, you've got the passive depreciation, one offsets the other. It benefits you, so that income that you're earning, you don't pay anything on because of that depreciation that's sitting there. And I think that's what's so important, but people can get caught in the trap because they're renting short term. They're the ones managing the property. They don't hire a property manager. They think, well, I'm just using this platform. I'm on VRBO or Airbnb. They're the ones that are doing the renting. It's like, no. They're just a online platform, a matchmaking service, if you will, that's just connecting your property to someone that's interested in staying in it for a short period of time. But somebody's got to do the work. Somebody's got to open the door. Somebody's got to get the place clean. Somebody's got to pay attention to the property and do the repairs and the fixes. And most of the time, that's the person that owns the property, and they're going to get hooked into that active status unless they set it up correctly the first time and take advantage of the strategy that you talked about. So I think that's really important. Otherwise, you're going to pay a lot more in tax. And you talked about, all the levels of taxes that you have to pay when it's active, including the 15.3 plus on all the self-employment taxes that you have to pay that nobody would have expected in this case. Let's talk about maybe some other tax benefits to having this property. If you're in the short-term rental market, are there other things that I could be writing off? And does this also get me into the trap of active versus passive? Like if I'm writing off supplies or writing off, internet and electric and all the stuff that goes along with being, owning a short-term rental, because you're not putting it in their name like you would as a long-term rental. It's in your name, the owner of the property.
Yeah, so we looked at the passive income. If I'm renting it out long-term, I have a property manager in place that's managing everything. I'm hands off. That passive income has passive losses. I'm not going to try and cram a bunch of expenses trying to write off my home office and my mileage. Versus if I have an LLC, taxes, and S Corp, and I am managing my own property, now I'm absolutely writing off my home office. Got to have that annual board meeting every year, whether it's in Hawaii or at your kitchen table, got to have one. So now I'm starting to write those things off. Even mileage to and from the grocery store, if I have to go buy supplies. Got to go to Sam's Club and buy towels and cleaning supplies and all the things that I have to purchase. Now I can write off my mileage. So there's a lot of things that you can write off, but it's so important to work with a tax professional. Make sure that we have the right guidance, because it's always those little mistakes that get costly later on. And especially with the Airbnb, great opportunity to make a lot of money, but it's also a great opportunity to really screw things up. I was talking to one of my friends today. He has an Airbnb, and he was saying that he pays attention to what you can and can't do. And even if you went to the airport to pick up a friend, you said, you know, I'm going to be there in Florida, and while I'm there, you can stay at my Airbnb, and I'm so nice that I'm just going to stop by the airport and pick you up. That little activity may have just turned that into an active income business.
Interesting.
So
you stepped out, you did some things that you thought were really nice to help a renter or a friend or somebody that's staying in your unit, but now you've gone out of your way and you're actually facilitating or spending more time in that business model, ultimately. Interesting. So bunch of things that you need to pay attention to, and I think what's so important is, you know, as you go down this path, or if you already own a rental property and you're short-terming it like through Airbnb and VRBO, talk to an expert like Adam so that you can learn more about how to do it right, get this set up properly, use the LLC taxed as an S entity, get the S election filed on it to make sure that you're taking advantage of that passive income being properly classified. I think that's really so important. And I think, you know, now as we go further, we start talking about, you know, issues in relationship to jurisdictions like cities and townships and counties. And in particular, I'd like to talk about two. One is Las Vegas, and the second one that you might not be as familiar with is Lake Tahoe. Now, South Lake Tahoe made some significant changes in one of the counties, and they really wanted to limit how many people. So they didn't eliminate who could have short-term rental. They actually issued a certain number of licenses. So if you didn't get a license to have a short-term rental property, you were out. So you just can't go and buy one in that area and get to use it. And I know in Las Vegas there's some limitations based on how close you are, I believe, to the Las Vegas, you know, hotel corridor, what they traditionally call the Las Vegas Strip. Can you tell us about that, and just broadly how people might have to be concerned or watching how jurisdictions are looking at allowing short-term rentals?
Yeah, and it's I think in Las Vegas especially is that eating into those casino revenues is probably not a good thing for individuals to try and do. So you're right. If you're within a certain distance of the strip of Las Vegas Boulevard, can't have an Airbnb. They've gone here in Las Vegas, some recent things. If you have a fourplex, those are great rental units, but you now have to have a special permit if you have a fourplex here in Las Vegas in order to rent that out, go through a licensing process, taking a course on health and things that they do to generate revenue for our county and state. So that's one of them. Having a decibel meter. We now have to have decibel meters in the backyard so that if there is a party, that decibel meter, if it goes above a certain amount, the homeowner gets notified. We've got to be within the HOA limits of what decibels during what hours of the day. So it's super important that, yeah, there's great locations that you can get your properties, but we also have to start paying attention to the new rules, because at the end of the day, Uncle Sam wants his taxes, whether it's city, state, county, there are taxes involved with it. It's got to be done right.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Well, I know there's a condo, a large condo group in Las Vegas, and years ago they had a bunch of people doing Airbnb and VRBO, short-term rentals, and the board of directors came in and changed the rules. So everyone that owned one of these units now could no longer short-term rent the property. You had to be long-term, and I don't know if long-term was 3 months or 6 months or what it was, but they basically blew up the opportunity for short-term rentals. And so I think that's just one of those things that you've got to watch about where you're doing it and what the likelihood is somebody's going to be upset about it. Now you're talking about, your neighbors and the noise that might go on in the community, to pay attention to all these things. I still think there's a great opportunity, in this place. Now in this world of short-term rentals, but talk to me about individuals that sort of take it to the extreme. And I've seen and heard of cases where individuals simply rent a property on a long-term basis, and then with permission from that landlord, turn it into a short-term rental. So they're basically short-term renting something they don't even own, and they're leasing it on a long-term basis. Tell me about that scenario, and how often do you hear about that?
Yeah, it's becoming more and more. There's companies that teach people how to do this, and this is what we call the Airbnb arbitrage. So instead of buying the house, I'm going to rent the house, and I'm going to put it on Airbnb and manage that. And the guy that owns the house is happy. His house is probably cleaner than if I'd hired a long-term tenant. Cleaning crews in every day or every couple days, cleaning the property, keeping it well kept and maintained. So he's getting his passive income and might even be able to charge a little bit more. Where my person that's now renting that property, putting it on Airbnb, has a lot higher profit margins with a lot lower risk. So if the market dried up, worst case scenario, I might violate the mortgage agreement, but I'm not getting my house foreclosed on. So it's really a good opportunity. And also, we look at the timing of this thing. I was talking with a client that has a property in Los Angeles, and he said, Adam, I had no idea, but if I rented my property for 30 days or more, if that person decided to stay, I had to go through the eviction process to get him out of the property. So rule of thumb now, he said, I learned the hard way, 29 days. That's the most I will rent a property in LA County. Las Vegas, we don't have that rule, but there are counties that do. So renting properties out, also great opportunity to make money, but if I rent it from somebody, I've also got to be mindful of what are the rules in this area. Are there any little nuances that are going to bite me later on? So great opportunity to make money, but also the risk involved as well.
I would imagine San Francisco and some of these, what would we say, more left-leaning jurisdictions that have rent controls and things like that, or you can't displace somebody that's renting from you. You've got to be really careful with that. That's interesting. But I love this arbitrage concept, because you might be renting a house for $2,500 a month and able to short-term it for $10,000 a month. I mean, it could be a lot of money in your pocket, especially if it's well positioned. I mean, if you can find it on a beach or find it near the Las Vegas Strip, where somebody just doesn't want, just one hotel room for $500 a night. They'd rather have a house with 3 bedrooms for $500 a night. And at $500 a night, if you're actually getting, let's say 20 days a month, that's $10,000. That's a lot of money, and people will pay that just to have more room, place to breathe, maybe a backyard to sit out in, because they don't want to be stuck in a big casino with, a lot of smoking and craziness going around. So there's some really interesting things that you can do with that, and just another way to take advantage of, the short-term rental market that's out there, especially if you don't have the money to buy your own house. You don't have to. Just go rent a house from someone else. Make sure they know what your intentions are, because you will create some problems with yourself if you don't and aren't upfront with that landlord. But I think that's a really fun business. So to sum things up, those people that are in the short-term rental market really need to pay attention to a few things. The liability that's in that business, just make sure you do it right. Use a land trust to hold the property. Use an LLC tax as an S corporation to receive the income off that property. Do it right. Make sure it's passive income, so you're not spending too much time actively managing it and get caught up in having to pay extra taxes and then lose, the offset against the depreciation that you might have if you own the property yourself. That's very, very important. And I think we want to reemphasize to everybody listening is you want to make sure that you do this right and you protect yourself, and then you minimize the amount of taxes that you will have to pay from the income that you're generating, but you you want the right classification of tax, making it passive for yourself. So Adam, thanks for educating us today. It's been fun talking about short-term rentals, and always you're a wealth of knowledge. I appreciate that so much about you. And if any of you that are listening want to get a hold of Adam, just call NCH, reach out to them, ask for Adam, and he's an expert in so many things, but most importantly, he's an expert in short-term rentals. So thanks for being on the program here today, Adam.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And for all of you tuning in, thanks for watching today. This is another edition of Wealthy and Wise. I'm your host, Cort Christie. Have a great day.